Well, tēnā koutou katoa e te whānau, kua tau mai I raro I te maru o tēnei zānanga, ko te zui, ko te wānanga rānei, e mihi atu ana kia koutou. Tuatahi, ko te tikanga ka tuku tō tātou karakia, āmuri ake ka kōrero ahau kia koutou te tikanga o te rā. Whānau, awesome to see everybody here. If we could just start with our karakia, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the housekeeping before we get started on our presentation. Ka pai, alrighty, you can see the karakia in front of us, and if everybody wants to mute their microphones, otherwise it kind of has this like scattergun kind of approach and everybody will be talking at once. So here we go. We're going to say our karakia together. Whaia, whaia, whaia. Ngā uratanga o te manatu hauora, ko te manaakitanga, ko te kaitiakitanga, ko te whakapono, ko te kōkiri, ngātahi, kia tai atu tātou, ki pai tata, ki pai tāwhiti, ki pai ora. Kia tūturu, kia whakamaua, kia tīna, tīna. Haumie, huie, tāiki. And that karakia, as you can see by the translation, just says, let us jointly pursue the values of the Ministry of Health, the Manatu Hauora. We take care of each other, we create an environment for our people to thrive, we work in good faith, and we move forward together. If we do this, we will lay hold of distant horizons and those near to us, and we will create a thriving future for all of our people. So there you go, whānau, a nice way to start our kōrero today. As I said in Te Reo Māori at the beginning, it was a big warm welcome to everybody. Thank you very much for coming along today. And just a couple of housekeeping points. If you can turn your microphone, make sure your microphone are turned off, and they are asking that we turn most of our screens off because it will help the whole process run a lot smoother, so we don't have kind of spots where it jumps in and out. So that's the first of the housekeeping. We are going to have time for questions later on during the presentation, and we'll tell you about how we're going to manage that shortly. We are recording this session, so if you've got any objections, so the recording means that everybody can go back and hear it later. And of course, we will be publishing these slides on the website, so you can go back to the information just in case we get through it too fast. How we're going to manage questions is that you submit your questions throughout the presentation via the chat function, which is kind of like the little air bubble at the top of your screen there, next to the two little people emoji kind of looking thing. And we will be accepting questions from now until just after 12. And a member from our Health Cert team will collate those questions and email them through for us to make sure we answer. So if we run out of time, we will endeavour to keep answering those questions and get those answers back out to everybody. Ka pai? Alrighty. So first of all, who are these people in front of you? And I'll hand the rākau over to you, Maria, to introduce yourself so that everybody knows who will be presenting today. Kia ora e hoa.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ko Maria Clark takuinga, ko puto aki te maunga, o hine matarua te awa, ko Ngāti Awa te iwi. Welcome, and I am a member of Te Apārangi, and my other pōtai is I work as a service manager for Te Pono Ora o Mātātua in the role of home and community and ACC. Awesome to have you all here. No mai hara mai.
Tēnā koe e hoa, and I've seen all that amazing work you've been doing down there, helping to, I see swabbing whānau and doing the kind of checks at the borders, so tēnā koe, tēnā koutou. Engari kia koutou mā, koriana manual tōku ingoa no pare hauraki a hau, e noho ana hau ki roto I taku whēne I nāia nei, ko taku day job I te rā, ko te mahi swab I roto I tēnei kaupapa, engari ko taku turanga anō ko te chair te tiamana o te āpārangi, me te manukura hauora I roto I a te korowai hauro o Hauraki. Kua hau te owner-operator o Phoenix House, tētahi rest home me private hospital, and kua hau te manukura hauora anō o Hauraki PHO. Koina taku mahi. Kia ora everybody, my name's Rihanna and I hail from a little place called Manaia, which is on the Coromandel Peninsula. I'm beaming in live to you today with some really good Wi-Fi, I hope, though you'll excuse the fact that I live in a very rural community, so it might get a little bit patchy. But Jade will take care of that, and of course we've got Maria there. I am the chair of Te Āpārangi and also chief executive for Te Korowai Hauro Hauraki, who are a kaupapa Māori NGO here on the Coromandel Peninsula. Also the CEO for Hauraki PHO, and also owner-operator of Phoenix House Rest Home and Private Hospital. My pleasure to be here today to share some time with you all. Kia ora. Oh, yeah. Jade, did you want to introduce yourself?
Kia ora, koutou, ko Jade Takamuingwa. I am the Principal Advisor within Quality Assurance and Safety, but providing support to Rihanna and Maria today as we get onto our topic about Paerewa Health and Disability Services Standard. And I'll jump in at the end to talk about process and those boring bits and bobs, which are also quite important. But then I'll hand it back over to Rihanna and Maria. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Jade. Okay, we'll get started then. So obviously we're all gathered here today to talk about ngā Paerewa, which were part of the health and disability standards that were reviewed, and we're hoping to talk about, to give some assistance around sector guidance. We're also going to be talking a little bit about what's next and hopefully answering as many questions as we can today. And we do appreciate Te Āpārangi were set up as a committee to help, as there were many different committees. And we do appreciate that this is a bit of a moving feast for everybody. Oh, sorry, and I'll just get back to that's all right, Jade. You're all good. Sorry, we've gone back a few slides there, Jade. Did we want to go forward? So we've done the housekeeping one. Technical difficulties, folks, won't be a second. So anyway, just while we're getting that sorted out, I'll just keep talking a little bit about. So the aim of the review was, from our point of view anyway, was to try and create an opportunity to, give a little more life to review and make sure that ngā Paerewa and specifically the parts that we were looking at, which were the te Tiriti kaupapa, were as well discussed, talked about, and reviewed as possible, which is what you've seen the outcome of. Kate Pai, I'll do it, Jade. Hopefully, can everybody see the slides as because I've taken over them a little bit? Okay, ka pai. Alrighty, and before we dive too far into the detail, awesome, thumbs up. Everybody knows the thumbs up, well done. We accept that this is an evolving space that we will grow and develop. And we are also learning the refreshed requirements of ngā Paerewa Health and Disability Services Standard together as well. And by no means is the intention here to, I know that it may feel like it makes things more tricky, but we're hoping we're going to give some support and some help around that today. Ka pai. Okay, so just a bit of a backstory, because everything requires a bit of a backstory. In early 2019, attendees to standards review scoping workshops confirmed that they wanted an and approach to both. So we wanted to update the current standards, and this was 1.4 recognition of Māori values and beliefs, and add te tiriti guidance throughout the entire standard, because we'd had a lot of feedback about, that we really needed to add that guidance in there. Good point. And of course, section 1.1 Paiora. So this is our group Te Āpārangi were established to direct this work, as I said. And of course, the 34 Te Tiriti or Waitangi statements throughout ngā Paerewa have been established as a result. A number of criteria throughout have been reviewed, and this presentation is designed to understand why some of those criteria needed to be reviewed and how they can be brought to life or evidenced, because that's really the important part. Ka pai? Okay, so without any further ado, let's get started. Maria, you jump in anytime you want to as well, Ewa, with some of these. So, Pai Ora, this was the so if we look at Pai Ora 1.1, you've got both versions there, the Te Reo Māori and the Te Reo Pākehā, and of course, just for the sake of today, we'll work on we'll use that Te Reo Pākehā just so everybody understands. Of course, Te Tiriti in this in Pai Ora or Healthy Future was about Māori flourish and thrive in an environment that enables good health and well-being. And as service providers, we work collaboratively to embrace, support and encourage a Māori worldview of health and provide health high quality, equitable and effective services for Māori framed by Te Tiriti or Waitangi. The criteria were set, we've put in the criteria there. So my service provider shall embed and enact Te Tiriti or Waitangi within all of its work, recognising Māori and supporting Māori in their aspirations, whatever they are, that is recognising mana motuhake. 1.1.2 is my service provider shall ensure my services are operating in ways that are culturally safe. Point 3, my service provider shall actively recruit and retain a Māori health workforce across organisational roles, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And to facilitate equity approaches, my service provider shall be Māori centred. And 1.1.5, my service provider shall work in partnership with iwi and Māori organisations within, beyond and the health sector to allow for better service integration, planning and support for Māori. So those are kind of some of the core things that we're going to talk a little bit through today. Goodbye. Goodbye. All right. Kei a koe hoa?
Ai, kei te pai.
Righty, so Jade's been awesome that she's come in and kind of circled those few there. So what we're aiming, Jade, can you just give a little bit more explanation about why we've put the highlights in those areas?
Yeah, so just sort of saying, these are we've said these things, but what do we actually mean by them, and what does that look like in practice? Rihanna, by the way, I think I might have accidentally taken control again, so feel free to do that, and then I'll stop.
Alrighty. So one of the things we recognise throughout the presentation, and certainly by the questions we've already had come in, is that these are the issues, these are the areas that people would want a little bit more guidance around, and more specifically, find some answers as to how they will be able to go through and get support around those particular areas. So we understand that when we say we shall embed and enact Te Tiriti within all the work, recognising Māori and supporting Māori in their aspirations, whatever they are. So this can be looked at many different levels, and it's not just about whether you have Māori clients within your provider, or it's more about understanding in a treaty partnership, how would we in our communities or in the region or in the district, because if you look to a district-wide point of view, most district health boards will have documents and plans and propose, pretty much every one of them will have a equity or a Te Tiriti based plan that you can actually access as a provider and use this as that framework for your organisation. I don't think any of the 20 odd DHBs won't have one. So what we're trying to say is that those documents are there and they're there to be utilised by everybody. Those documents are often built off the surveys and the aspirations that have been raised by Māori. And some people will say, well, why is it, we're not saying that only Māori. you know, that the aspirations of only Māori will be recognised, because remember, every district health board will also have a plan that is that speaks about the aspirations of the general population. But as partners in Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which is one of those founding documents of Aotearoa or New Zealand, then this is the hope, is that we can use these documents, we can use these frameworks, and we can look at the opportunities as partners to enact all of those key principles. So some people often say, I don't have any Māori in my service. You know, why should I have to do this kind of mahi? We would suggest that this is more about taking that kind of more higher level strategic approach, which is how, if you had Māori in your service, this would certainly help frame up how service delivery might happen for them. And we want you to go in and get those documents and be able to utilise them, which they'll all be on websites. They're all, you know, you can simply download them, and it just helps you to check in. And I'm going to give you an example later on throughout the presentation. My service provider shall ensure my services are operating in ways that are culturally safe. Everybody has a you know, we all have to do that, and culturally safe means culturally safe for everybody. So we have many different cultures here in Aotearoa, and culture relates to a number of issues. So not just ethnicity, but it also relates to things like, you know, religious beliefs, what our, you know, gender equality, all of these kind of issues fall under culture. So we want to make sure that that's part of it. Yes, and of course, Māori are part of that culture. My service provider shall actively recruit and retain Māori health workforce across organisational roles. And this is one that often is a real discussion point for our whānau, because they ask, well, actually, we've got to be equal opportunity, you know, equal opportunity providers and employers. So what we're talking about here is that where we can, we will actively recruit and retain a Māori health workforce, because we know it has a wider effect on the equity imbalances for Māori across our service area. So it's not just about that we want to hire Māori so that, you know, so that we can look after Māori people. It is about acknowledging that there are inequities across the landscape, and part of those inequities are around, you know, the more that we have people in employment, the better housing we have for people, the better educational opportunities. And of course, when we recruit into our providers, we not only employ people, but we are actively educating them. And this has some really major spin-offs in terms of equitable outcome towards health and well-being for our whole population. So it's good for everybody. So actively recruiting and retaining Māori health workforce is simply because sometimes, well, historically certainly, Māori have not you know, have not fared well in these spaces. So it's an encouragement, and it's an idea that we will actively try and recruit and retain a Māori health workforce. And there might be some things that we do differently for these workforces when we have them on board. To facilitate equity approaches, my service provider shall be Māori centred. So Māori centred is kind of, and I get that probably feels a bit ambiguous for people, particularly if you've never had a Māori centred approach. But if I looked at our organisation as a Māori NGO, then what we do is have some values. And most people will already be looking at this. Most people will, oh, sorry, dodging in and out there. Most people will already have values that you use, like words like manaakitanga come to mind, kotahitanga, whanaungatanga, which often mean, you know, that we work to look after people. Sorry, Jade, we might be. Are you okay there? Are we having? Yeah.
Do you have control of,
I'll
at the moment we're on slide 11.
Yeah.
Would you like
okay.
control, or
just
would you
finished.
like?
That's okay. Yeah, this is probably good.
Okay.
And so Māori centred is really just about how we incorporate those kaupapa Māori kind of values, how we incorporate language, how we incorporate some of the processes and procedures. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we find those things. And the final one there is, of course, about how does my provider work in partnership with iwi and Māori organisations. Almost every place will have a kaupapa Māori provider of some sort working in your immediate area. So if I use the Coromandel, for instance, where I own a rest home and private hospital, I know that we have Te Korowai Hauoro Hauraki, who are a kaupapa Māori NGO. I know that we've got our local iwi, and we're going to show you a few websites about how you can find out more of those things for your provider as well. So this is about how you bring those groups on board, which will help help really grow your provider as well. So it's an opportunity to understand a little bit more about what's in your local community. Okay, so I'm just moving on to, okay. We want to acknowledge that generally we hope that the answers, because this is the way it was designed, the answers are generally in the sector guidance on the ministry's website. So with active links to the frameworks and research to help guide you and your organisation. So that's where we would advise everybody to go, is to go to the ministry website. This will be updated regularly to reflect the latest guidance and research in this space. And again, we've put the link on there so that for those who are using this, you'll be able to go in there and have a look at that website and give some examples. Kapai. All righty. Maria, do you want to take the next part?
So I was hoping that I could have a kōrero about 1.1 from a provider's perspective. Would that be helpful? Would that be helpful? So for 1.1.1, from a provider perspective, I would be looking at my service delivery plan and looking to see that I could demonstrate within that service plan a partnership between mainstream and Māori. So what that would look like for me would be the introduction of training, support work training for Te Tiriti or Waitangi, and I'd look to access that training locally because most of our areas have someone in there who is well versed in the treaty training. So I forgot to mention that we are based here in Whakatane, and I'm just going to tell my team to shush because they're pretty loud at the moment. They hungry. That's what's wrong. They hungry. Send them off to lunch. Okay, so if that gets too loud, tell me and then I'll try and roar again. So I would be providing them with Te Tiriti training. In the recruitment process, I would be looking to have a particular percentage of Māori applicants, and that would be in both levels. I'd ensure that there was some Māori sitting at board level, Māori sitting at executive level, and then Māori sitting at management level. It wouldn't be completely Māori, but I would certainly be trying to demonstrate that I have been inclusive in trying to recruit those types of people, that ethnicity of people. For 1.1.3, my service provider shall actively recruit. That's the health workforce, that's my support workers. That for us, that goes without say. If that's if that's going to be an issue for you because the area that you live in is predominantly other ethnic groups, then we still need to be demonstrating as part of the standards that a clause sits somewhere in your recruitment process saying, yeah, we give acknowledgement to Māori, to the recruitment of Māori health workers. Unfortunately, we're not able to do that. That's still trying to meet the standards because you're saying it within your policies. 1.1.4 to facilitate equity approaches. So from our perspective, as a provider, once we set all those things in place from 1.1 to 1.3, everything else falls into line in terms of equity approaches. And by applying these principles, you're actually demonstrating an equity approach. 1.1.5, my service provider shall work in partnership. And again, once you get the first top three all in line and you have policies and procedures that align to those, 1.1.5 is easily demonstrated. Are there any partai on that? Does anyone want to ask me some questions around that? How are we doing that, Jade? Are we opening it up to them, or are they
The plan was to, Aroha Maria, I didn't mean to cut you off. We were planning to collect them and then send them through an email so that way you could answer them at the end. That was the plan.
Okay, that sounds good.
Ka pai, awesome. That's so that's a great explanation from a provider perspective. And of course, that's one of the things we were hoping today that we could give people some confidence around, is that for Maria and I, as part of Te Ao Parangi, we're also, we're also right out there managing providers, having to manage these same standards and be accountable to them as well. Okay, so we talked a little bit about that. Okay, all right. So again, this is really just giving what we're trying to example here at 1.4. So this is e whakakautetia, ana hau I am treated with respect. So this is looking now more into those guidance. So 1.4.6, service provided shall respond to tangata whaikaha needs and enable their participation in Te Ao Māori. So the sector guidance, service providers demonstrate an awareness of tangata whaikaha needs and enable them to access these things. And you can access your local resources as well as kaumātua marae rōpū to find out this information and how you can support Māori within your service. So again, what we wanted to we were hoping that we could do today is give some examples, which we'll do. With links that will help people find access to those things when you might not be aware of what's happening in your community. And every community will be different, so we accept that there will be varying degrees of access. But again, if you go all the way back to the fact that each of us belong inside of a district health board, and if I use Waikato DHB as an example, that's the DHB that we come under. They have what they call Te Koro Waiora, which is their equity plan and framework. And so that gives us a lot of information. They also have a site which will help us find out what are the additional services that are around us. And we have other ways of finding out what are your local iwi, and therefore that gives you some access to who might be those kaumātua and marae rōpū that can get you that support as well. And we'll be using some examples of that today. So where to find some of these sources, and again, the Ministry of Health has a lot of them themselves, and you may or may not have heard of them. But an example, for instance, is Whaia Te Ao Marama, which is the Māori Disability Action Plan, 2018 to 2022. It's a really good read, and it can be found on the Manatū Hauora website as well. So this is somewhere where you can go, get that really good information, and it will help frame up what you're trying to achieve as a provider as well, and how to evidence some of those areas. Ka pai. 1.8 looked at nōku te mana ki te tuku amu. I have the right to complain. Amu means complain, by the way, whānau, that's the key word in there. 1.8.5, the Code of Health and Disability Consumer Rights and the complaints process shall work equitably for Māori. So the sector guidance that's given in there is, of course, the Code of Health and Disability Services Consumer Rights is visible and available in Te Reo Māori, in English, and of course, New Zealand Sign Language in accessible formats. So all of these things can be accessed again by through Te Manatu Hauora or Ministry of Health. That service providers use their best efforts to verify Māori and whānau understand their rights. So again, most of us collect this information when we admit our whānau into our service. We'll do a full assessment. It will include the collection of ethnicity and where applicable should include what those iwi affiliations, if you do have Māori people in your service, and of course that we use our best efforts to verify and make sure they understand their rights in both Te Reo Māori and Te Reo Pākehā. Now whānau, I accept that the majority of our Māori people here in Aotearoa do not have their language, and there's a really big long backstory as to why that is. But moving forward, what we can do is make sure that irrespective of whether they are fluent speakers of Te Reo Māori or whether they understand Te Reo Māori, that we as organisations have that option there for people to be able to use. And of course, it's as easy as just putting both posters up. The complaint resolution policy and procedure forms, surveys, guidelines and resources are designed adequately, capture complaints made by Māori service providers and consider the following things. Any underreporting of complaints from Māori. Now this is acknowledging that often Māori won't complain and they will sort of just accept that that's their lot, and again there's a really rich backstory as to why our people behave like this. So it often leads to us believing that we have no complaints, but the level of access so not wanting to complain for fear that it's going to jeopardize their service, and of course being able to access those complaint processes without necessarily highlighting it to people. So it's really, really awesome when we have the complaints paperwork all throughout our provider, which means they don't have to go and ask someone for that, can often be a really good way for people to be able to understand that. And so it's as simple as really saying on admission of our whānau to our service, we do have, this is our complaints process, and you will be able to find and access forms so that you can fill those out at your own, at your own leisure, without having to come up and ask the registered nurse or the person who's on duty that day. So that's what that kind of links to, and of course, and often asking our Māori residents or clients or patients, whatever you want to call them, what works best for them, because often we hear about this concept of kanohi ki te kanohi, which means face-to-face conversations, and our people will often say that that's how we like to operate, but I've got to tell you there are some who will be not wanting to do the face-to-face thing, but really want to say something about a service without jeopardizing their care. So it's just that's what that's kind of talking to. It means that no one approach is the best approach, but often having conversations with the people who, the residents of your service, their families, and of course your kaimahi will often give you some guidance as to how you can best address that. Cool. Maria, did you have anything to add to that, or are you happy with that?
Yep. Okay, so I thought that I would go back and retrack quite just like I did before. So I'll start with the 1.8 and what that would look like for us as a provider, for me as a manager. So for 1.8.5, what we've done is we have simplified our complaints form. We have a really basic name, if you want to, giving them the option to identify themselves, and then just a small piece there where they can either write what their complaint is about, or the option to speak with their service coordinator, or the option to speak with the next line up, or if the complaints are about those two positions, then the option to talk with someone at another level. And there's a piece in here which talks about making providers use their best efforts. So what I do with my team is I try and encourage them to take away the feelings of embarrassment around complaining, and giving lots of reassurance to Māori and Pacific Islanders for that matter, because we operate the same when it comes to complaining. I try and encourage my staff to talk about the complaint process as if it is a everyday, very acceptable part of them receiving their cares. In our policies and procedures, we make reference to best efforts, and that will meet that standard 1.8.5. And then I wanted to go back up. Is this all right? I wanted to go back up to slide number 12, where we're talking about tangata whaikaha and their needs and the engagement with community support. So in this instance, what we do as a provider to try and achieve that, because we're not solely, just because we have a Māori name doesn't mean to say that all of our clientele are Māori. They most definitely are not. And our operations, our frameworks, while they are mainstream, we can embed some of our Māori frameworks into the mainstream frameworks, which is probably what most of you as providers operate under, as a mainstream framework. So to address this particular slide here, within our focus group, we incorporate and invite kaumātua from within our area. We try and target kaumātua and queer who are actually receiving services, and they form a focus group which meets every quarterly to discuss any service provider issues that have come up, or to bring more awareness to our staff. And that, because sitting at the table is this focus group and my staff, members of my staff, so that we can get direct feedback, and we're consistently demonstrating good partnership between ourselves and Māori. The pamphlets that Rihanna has allured to that are up there on slide number 13, the Māori Disability Action Plan, each area has some sort of Māori action plan, and we've referred back to them, and those have given us guides on really how to achieve equity for Māori. And no one's nailed it yet, so you aren't going to get the answers in there, but you're going to get some suggestions that help us to address some of the issues around equity for Māori. Yeah, so that's me. Am I good? Am I good? Are we good?
Awesome, Maria, awesome.
Kapai.
I hope this is working for everybody, where we kind of tag teaming a little bit. So the idea is to try and describe things and then give some explanations. And yeah, so I'm hoping this is working okay so far. Alrighty, so where were we? Okay, let's go. 2.1. Hunga mahi me te hanga workforce and structure. And I think what I'll do, Maria, is that at the end of each slide, I'll hand over to you just so if you want to add anything rather than go too many slides ahead. Aroha mai hoa. Okay, 2.1.10, governance bodies shall have demonstrated expertise, te tiriti, health, equity, and cultural safety as core competencies. So the sector guidance here is that we give evidence shows demonstrated expertise in te tiriti, health, equity, and cultural safety, and that training of governance body members occurs. There is an executive leader on the governance body who champions Māori health equity as an integral component of quality, and useful tools are listed there. Now, whānau, I own a rest home and hospital, which is like 10 beds hospital, 20 beds rest home, very, very small. And I know there'll be other providers here listening today that will be thinking the same thing, and you're wondering, how on earth do we achieve all of these, all of these things? Now, remember, it just asks us as in the criteria that governance bodies shall have demonstrated expertise in te tiriti, health, equity, and cultural safety as core competencies. So what we're trying to encourage there is that where you have, for instance, if you're big enough that you have a board, that you consider having Māori expertise sitting at that governance group. Trust me, whānau, it will do no harm. It will actually add to the culture of your entire organisation. And often it adds not only expertise, but just a really different viewpoint or worldview, if you like, and add to the flavour of the conversation. So it takes nothing away. It's really seeking to add something to your organisation. If you're a smaller organisation like mine, which is an owner-operator, then obviously, and being Māori, we're obviously part of that design, we're part of that governance, we're part of the group there. And what we're suggesting at a smaller level, then there are opportunities there for you to address these things by making sure that you've got adequate training for yourselves, your staff around te tiriti. And of course, this has long been a requirement of the sector standards to have regular te tiriti training for your staff, yourselves, that acknowledging cultural safety and how you bring that to life for all the various cultures that are within your organisation. And of course, health equity is an important one, that we know that when we don't address equity, when we apply a universal approach, often what happens is that the gap between those who are getting good health outcome and those who are not stays the same. So a health equity, and I don't know if anyone's ever seen the wonderful pictures. So there's one picture, and I'm not sure if we put it in here, but probably we should have, and we'll remember to do it next time. But it shows the bike. There's lots of different ones. You see the scenario where they're standing on, so they're trying to look over the fence, and a health equity approach. Health equality suggests that we should give everybody a box. But if you're really tall or if you're really short, then that box is not going to be terribly helpful. So the idea of equity is to give you the right number of boxes to ensure that everybody can see over the fence. And they have a really neat picture using bikes as well around disability, so no use giving everybody a bike if you cannot ride the bike. You're not big enough to reach the pedals, or you have a disability that means you cannot work the bike. So that bike becomes effectively useless. So equity is trying to ask us to approach things from a point of view where we start asking ourselves, what do we need to give each of the groups who are part of our organisation, or those who could be part of our organisation over time? What do we need to add to that so that everybody gets the right things at the right time? So that's one thing. And we've given some suggestions in the guidance around, it could be that if you're big enough, you might have an executive leader amongst yourselves who is that equity champion. If you're big enough, then it might have that you'll have governance members who you specifically put in there to make sure that worldview or that tiriti partnership is worked out. But equally, we'll go back to that district health board conversation again, that often all DHBs have a Māori health work or Māori health unit within them, and they will also have tikanga guidance, practical suggestions for you to be able to access as well. So going back to your DHB and getting that information and working it into this is a really helpful way of doing it. Having good access, so your strategy and funding portfolio managers will also have equity managers inside of there as well, and they'll be able to get you access to somebody who can help you work on these things. So there's lots of different ways, and we really just wanted to make sure that we gave you as many different options to look at, whether you're big or whether you're small. There's something for all. Maria, did you want to add to that?
Yep, so we are in between. We're not big, but we're not small. And we don't have on our board experts in Te Tiriti or health equity, but we have produced a policy that allows us to buy in that type of expertise when required, and that would meet that standard. Pai?
Tino pai. Pai, all righty, moving right along, because I know, hey, we're nearly halfway through the slides, whānau. Don't worry. And your questions are coming in, and we're getting ready to answer those too. So awesome work, whānau. Okay, 2.2, kaunga me te mōrearea, quality and risk. You know, so everybody knows about quality and risk. 2.2.8, service providers shall improve health equity through critical analysis of organisational practices. And the guidance that we've given here is that service providers establish policies, practices and training that will support and require their healthcare and support workers to review at defined intervals their organisation's practice through a health equity and quality lens. This may include prioritised use of health equity assessment tool. Otherwise they call it the HEAT tool, which is I'm not sure everybody is aware of this, but we've given you the user's guide and the links to be able to find those, or equivalent and appropriate equity tools that you may have, and of course ethnicity data improvement tools. So the idea here is really to look at often data tells us, or it paints a real picture about how people are accessing services. And if I use an example, for instance, we're a kaupapa Māori NGO provider, and often what we do, so we have 60% odd of our population are Māori, 40% are non-Māori. So we'll often use data to help frame up what do we need to be aware of, because often for our Māori clients, they will be high, they'll have high and complex requirements and needs. So we need to make sure that we gear our service to address those issues. And of course, then we want to make sure that because we're a kaupapa Māori provider, that other 40% of our population are aware of what that means as well. So there's lots of different tools you can use in this space. Equity, as I mentioned before, I talked about the two pictures. Equity is about making sure we all get there. So unfortunately, when we use an equality approach, then it will make sure that it's more universal. This is a more targeted approach to make sure that those who are faring worse off in the health, the ability to access health services, that we actually get them lifted above the fence line so that they can see over it, just as an example. Maria, did you want to add to that?
So being medium, we don't have any of those flash things that analyse health equity for Māori. So what we've decided to do as a provider is, because we have our CMS system and we tend to just collect very mundane name, NHR, ethnicity information from the client's referrals. So what we've done now is we've extended our CMS's ability to capture social issues within that referral, because the Inter-Eye tool is able to capture that kind of information, but we haven't, as a provider, we haven't been good at capturing that information, and we've only just started to do that. And from our perspective, the more information that we collect around their social and health status, that provides them with a more holistic service delivery, and it also provides us with better information to address health equities from a quality lens perspective. So that's how we think we're going to address 2.2.8.
Awesome, Maria, and I love the way that you use those examples. So, you know, we've got small to medium to very large providers, and it's really important to acknowledge that everybody's going to be different. And of course, again, everybody has a DHB that they're connected to. So you can get some really good data out of your local DHB just simply by emailing and asking them for the very data that we seek to find for your population, and they can be they'll be really helpful. I hope they'll be really helpful. So if they're not, do tell. Okay. Sorry, you right, Jade? You good? Okay. 3.1, te urunga me te whakakore urunga, entry and declining entry. So 3.1.5, service providers demonstrate routine analysis to show entry and decline rates. And this must include specific data for entry and decline rates for Māori. And we've given some sector guidance there around service providers demonstrate routine analysis of entry and decline rates for Māori, where ethnicity data is incomplete and inconsistent. Service providers improve data quality to make sure such analysis is more sort of robust. And service providers identify and implement supports to benefit Māori and whānau. So again, this is asking us to make sure that really on those admissions that we identify ethnicity. It's super important that we have ethnicity, and if you're going to identify ethnicity, it's often a really good idea to then ask the next question, which is what are your iwi affiliations? And that can help often create a really great profile for you as a provider with your residents as they come in. And this includes your staff as well. If you are hiring Māori, then it's really good again to ask those key questions. So yes, and that way you can really analyze these things relatively easy just by looking at that ethnicity data for our people. And again, if you're a bigger provider, you'll have the ability to analyze your data with various IT solutions. If you're much smaller, like again the 30 that I have, granted it's on a spreadsheet, but still really effective. Like I count them up, I can see my ethnicity data. The organisation that I also work for, Te Koro Waihawaro or Hauraki, we have kind of 10,000 people enrolled there. So obviously we use a database to help us manage. We use IT solutions to manage that particular particular issue. But again, it depends on your size. Maria, how about you?
So the collection of that information and how accurate it is, we've found as a provider, is that the people that I'm sending out to have those conversations with, because they don't always put it on the referrals, and yet they're the first point of call is the NASC people. So a general thing that we do is when we walk into the home, we identify ourselves and our whakapapa, and that generally gives us, it makes the client more at ease, and then they start listening to your whakapapa and they go, oh, geez, you sound like you're related to us. And then they start opening up, and that's how we capture as much of the whakapapa information that we can. And I mean, I have, not all of my service coordinators are Māori. I have other ethnic groups here. They still do their whakapapa, no matter whether it's English or Aboriginal, and they can capture that information by just sitting down and having that conversation. And so long as, and I also have a policy in place that talks about first home visit is generally a whakapapa visit. getting to know yourself, them getting to know us, and us getting to know them. So that policy would and procedure would achieve 3.1.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Kia ora, Maria. Okay, so that's great. We'll move right along. Okay, 3.2, taku huarahi ki te oranga, my pathway to well-being. Huarahi is like a pathway or road. So this is my pathway to well-being. And 3.2.6, service providers shall, A, together with tangata whaikaha, develop policies and procedures that ensure tangata whaikaha and whānau participate in service development. B, deliver services that give tangata whaikaha choice and control over their supports. And C, remove barriers that prevent tangata whaikaha and whānau from independently accessing information. So whānau, tangata whaikaha refers to people with disabilities. Tangata meaning person, whaikaha is kind of, it's a spin, if you like. So rather than disability from a negative point of view, it's whaikaha, they're trying to find strength. They might be trying to find strength in some area. So what we're trying to describe there is that everybody wants to be a part of planning a service that's developed for them. And, you know, as providers, sometimes we can get so busy doing the do that we forget about asking our people, actually, does this even suit your needs? Are you even, you know, enjoying the way that we deliver this? And you can get some really interesting results because, again, we often are working under pressure. We're often working to what we think, you know, we're trying to address everything at once. And sometimes we forget to ask the really basic question, which is actually, are we meeting your needs or not? And how do we capture that information? And then how do we make sure that we can demonstrate it, particularly when it comes around to that audit time? So, yeah. Maria, did you want to add to that at all?
I was just going to say that this particular standard, while it is new, some of the components are familiar to us, like removing barriers that prevent. If I didn't have tangata whaikaha there, you would have the client and family from independently accessing information. You do that anyway as a provider. So, you know, this 3.2.6 shouldn't be scary for anyone. It's really te āpaeranga rangi, this is us threading te Tiriti and kaupapa Māori Paerewa through a standard that really already exists within the old standards for us. For instance, together with develop policies and procedures, if you have a focus group, out of that focus group will drop policies and procedures. So the standard that we talked about before supports 3.2.6 if you have a focus group. It also supports, a focus group would support B, deliver services that give our clients choice and control over their supports. That is familiar to all providers. That B is familiar with. What would be strange for you is that you can see tangata whaikaha in there and you're thinking, okay, what does that look like? You already know what that looks like. Yeah, so that's my part.
Awesome. Okay, alrighty. So I'm just mindful. I know that everyone will be getting ready to get back into working. Okay, so, and also, again, just a reminder to check with your local DHB. They've got local guidelines which can be used, referenced by service providers. You don't have to reinvent the wheel sometimes. It's just about going out and getting the bits you need that you think are relevant. And of course, Māori health units within those DHBs can be really great resource. Okay, just a reminder there. Okay, 3.3, ngā mahi takitahi individualised activities. So 3.3.3, service providers shall encourage their workforce to support community initiatives that meet the health needs and aspirations of Māori and whānau. And 3.3.4, service providers shall facilitate opportunities for Māori to participate in Te Ao Māori. So we've got a couple of things that we wanted to kind of show you, and I'm hoping this works when we do this, because, you know, all best laid plans, right? So we understand that what we're asking people that sometimes might not be well connected to these things, it's about us trying to make sure that you can find those connections. So find your local mana whenua. So Māori Maps is one of those things. Now, if I push it, and I'm hoping I haven't lost you all. Okay, looks like we're there. So this is what that looks like and I'm hoping you can see this. Oh, have you got that one, Jade? Are you controlling that, or are we good? Yep, thumbs up there. Good stuff. Okay, so this gives you an idea about how you can find some of those tribal areas. And it's a really good way for you to get in there really quick, have a look. It shows you right down to what your local marae are. Oh, you can't see. Okay, right. So good chat. Thank you. Jade, can you see this? Oh, maybe is that easier? Can we see? Yep. Okay. Yep. We've got thumbs up coming up, so that's good. So it's just it will give you an idea. Jade, can you just hit on? Can we just hit on one of the marae as an example? So yeah. So it will give you a little bit of a descriptor picture usually. It talks about the marae. It'll give you the address if we drop down there, and it gives you contact detail information as well. And some key information about that. Okay, so address is one thing, so that's good. Sometimes they'll have emails, sometimes they'll have phone numbers. It really just depends what's going on. If we come back up, can we come back up to, let's say, up in the Coromandel Peninsula there, just because I'll be able to confirm some stuff. All right, what have we got in there? Have we got many in there? None listed in. I might not have any on there, Jade. It's okay. They seem to have disappeared off. Okay, that's all right. That doesn't matter. We don't have to. We don't have to go into that. Just be a bit much, asking the system a bit much today. Ka pai. All right. So can we jump out of that one, Jade, and then open up Te Whata? So whānau, Te Whata is another tool or another resource that might be useful for people. So Te Whata, you can find a whole bunch of information, and Jade can always work miracles here. So we'll get her to open it up, because when I tried it, I think I wrecked it for you last time. So I'll let Jade open this one up. Okay, so and again, it's a way of you being able to access that information. So very shortly, we should be able to see. Okay, here we go. So can we go into Hauraki, just because again, it's kind of a simpler one there. And if we go to, it'll show straight away on Te Whata what all the iwi in my general area are. So if we go to, can we go to Ngāti Pūkenga, please, Ki Waio, which is one of the iwi that you can find in Coromandel Township area. So it's going to give me some really basic information from a population point of view. So it tells me straight away how many people who are affiliated with Ngāti Pūkenga, what the population in this area is. It tells me at a glance what bit of a dashboard, what the age distribution is. So if we can hit on the population, please, Jade, just to give an example, gives you a nice little graph. And if you go to the bottom of that, Jade, and it should have all Māori. So if we hit the little square that says all Māori, straight away it gives me a comparison against all Māori. And then all of New Zealand, it's going to give me a further comparison of that population base. So these graphs can be copied and pasted into your profiles, and it'll give you some other stuff such as economic. It'll give you health if you go into health. Oh, sorry, yeah. So it'll go down to health. It's got varying degrees of information depending on your iwi. So it gives me the smoking rates, you know, and of course it's relative if you're a provider in some areas. So that's just an example of how you can use te whata. I found it to be a really great resource, particularly if I've got people coming into our organisation from around the motu. So yeah, just another useful tool for everybody, whānau. Okay, so can we go back to our slides, please? Okay, here we go. Nearly there, folks, and then we'll get into the questions, because I'm mindful that we're... Okay, so that's te whata. All right. So if we go to 3.7, haumanu whakahikororo. So this is electroconvulsive therapy. 3.7.4 for Māori, service providers shall recognise the role of whānau and community in a person's illness and treatment, and particular beliefs such as the sacredness of our heads as essential. So the sector guidance here talks about where whānau want to be more closely involved in and consulted on specific cultural preferences and concerns. Service providers carefully consider the indications for ECT and all aspects of the process and explain to them in a culturally sensitive manner. Te whare tapa whā is a Māori model of care, and other Māori models of care are relevant. Information should also include alternative treatment options. So this is really talking to, I know it seems like it might be a bit of a strange thing to mention, but often when we do things, we put things over people's heads, and it's really just trying to give some more explanation that we have a specific belief that our heads are tapu. It's where, if you remember when the baby is born, that we have that fontanelle as the babies start to take shape, and we all know not to go pushing in those areas until the skull has, come together and done its thing, and it provides a bit more protection. But we recognise the very tapu nature of our heads, but often as health providers we go around, we have to do things, we put the old temperature gauge in the air, and we do certain things that we brush people's teeth, and so on and so forth. So it's really not just ECT, might I add, but it's really acknowledging that these kind of practices, we need to think a little bit about the head, what it means for Māori, and there'll be other cultures who have similar kind of things around different parts of the body, but that's generally what it's asking us to be mindful of, and to recognise those Māori models of care that might be able to help us in some of those areas. And some service providers could use the Takarangi competency framework to guide best practice in culturally safe care, which is another example. So, Maria, did you have anything you wanted to add to 3.7?
So I was just going to say that for us, when it comes to those types of treatment, when we're talking with our whānau on the entry into our services, we offer alternative therapies such as rongoa, mirimiri, and spiritual guidance from our local tohunga. We make sure that is also on the table, as well as the mainstream options around this type of thing, this type of therapy, so that they have a clear, they have a choice, really. And and those types of therapies are not the only things that are on the table for them.
Ka pai, kia ora, Maria. Now, whānau, we know that ECT doesn't relate to everybody who are on here today. It was just an example, but as I said before, there are many different things we do around the head with any person we provide care to, and it's just being mindful that for some people there will be cultural reference points, and for Māori, the head is definitely one of those. Ka pai. Alrighty, here we go. 3.8, te whiwhi me te tiaki ngā pūtau he mame ngā kikiri, obtaining and caring for gametes and embryos. So again, this is relating to fertility providers, because we had this we had this as part of the review. So 3.8.8, service providers shall ensure the design of the facility and the delivery of service are culturally and clinically safe for Māori who visit and use their service. And again, the sector guidance there is that that some of the providers are Māori centred. For example, they provide sufficient information focused on Māori needs, sharing the experiences of Māori men and women with fertility treatment. Service providers monitor access of their services by ethnicity to verify that provision. And of course, service providers have suitable processes and procedures to verify their day-to-day services are culturally clinically safe. So, what you can start to see for those, this is a criterion guidance that relate to a lot of things, but specifically this one was targeted at the obtaining and caring for gametes and embryos, and it's about the way that Māori see life from the beginning through to the very end, and it's not indifferent for many other cultures as well, Indigenous cultures and specifically. So it's giving some ideas. We're not saying, whānau, that you have to go out there and, have a carved waharo at your service and, and all those kind of things. It's really just being mindful about what would that look like. And again, when you introduce Māori concepts or Māori worldviews, it's not taking anything away from anybody else. It's really just adding that other viewpoint and that other flavour to your organisation, which I think is really awesome. And Maria, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Ka pai. Okay. 5.2, te hōtaka kaupare pokenga me te whakatinanatanga, the infection prevention program and implementation. So 5.2.12, service providers shall provide educational resources that are available in te reo Māori and are accessible and understandable for Māori accessing services. And 5.2.13 IP, personnel and committees shall participate in the partnership with Māori for the protection of culturally safe practice when it comes to infection protection, and thus acknowledge the spirit of te tiriti. Now, again, while there is sector guidance, there are other good places to go, particularly for resources about infection. The infection program prevention program you're going to have, and this is in many languages, including te reo Māori. So you can go into there, you can find those resources, and if you can't, again, going back to those local communities who may or may not be able to support your program. But that's what we're asking for, is that people go to the Manatū Hauora sites, go to your local DHB. They will have many different resources that you possibly don't even know about as yet. And those resources will help you build up a really nice opportunity. We acknowledge, again, that there are not that many people in Aotearoa who speak fluent te reo Māori, but this again is offering the opportunity. It's about creating a sense that this language, one of our 3 official languages, is as important as all the other languages, and us getting used to being providers, being a community, being the nation of Aotearoa, New Zealand, getting used to using that language interchangeably and comfortably as well, because it's, I know that I'm a speaker of te reo Māori, and I think it's a really beautiful language, and the opportunity is there for us all to learn it. Maria, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to say to the audience that 5.2, you all know, it's all about infection control. The difference here, what we're asking here, is that there is some consideration to having that information, delivering that information to Māori in a culturally appropriate way, i.e. either through your pamphlets, which are in te reo Māori, or kanohi kitea, which is face-to-face, an explanation. But generally, you all do this. You all do 5.2 and can meet that standard. And it's just that extra lift up so we can see over the fence where you're providing some extra support for Māori to understand those practices and be able to implement them. Pai?
Ai, kia ora, Maria. And a really great example is that if you use COVID as one of the really immediate things, so you can see down there we've got that Unite Against COVID, but Te Puni Kōkiri, which is the Ministry for Māori Affairs, if you like, that's what it used to be called, Te Puni Kōkiri put out some really great pictorial kind of examples of how to manage infection prevention for our people. So they had really lovely demonstrations of people with kauai. It was animated, and it was a really good way to teach our people, you know, sneeze into the elbow, 2 meters distancing, and all that other good stuff. So there are some really neat ways, if you explore a little further, to find those kind of documents that you can use in your provider every single day. Okay. All righty. Oh, did we miss? Oh, no, that was it. Yay. Okay, right. So we're getting to the partai. And Jade, do we forward on to the next slide, or is that when we go to our email? Sorry, Fana, just got to make sure that we get this right for everybody.
Email. Apologies.
Sorry, I'm waving at people who are driving past after getting their vaccination and swabs.
Shall I read them aloud to you, or would you like to read them?
That would be great if you could.
Cool. So the first one up is for national providers across multiple DHBs. Are you suggesting that each DHB document needs to be reviewed in light of region?
Yeah, okay, so that's a great question. For instance, here in Hauraki, we have 3 different district health boards that we are accountable to under contracting. So because of our whānau and Kaiawa area, they come under counties Manukau. Everything in the middle of the Coromandel Peninsula comes under the Waikato District Health Board. And then, of course, there's that lovely little Waihi beach area, which becomes part of Bay of Plenty. So I completely understand. No, not at all. I think that, you know, just having one, our suggestion really here is that all DHBs have these documents and frameworks, and it's your very, you know, your own personal right to go and grab them, use them, as long as you put a reference point to whichever DHB you used, more power to you. So great, Pato. Thank you for that.
Wonderful. Next question. I wonder about the capacity of Māori groups to provide input. For example, in the southern region, there are 65 aged care providers and additional community providers. I wonder about capacity for Kai Tahu to provide input into all those groups.
Yeah, and that's another partai pai, because of course we know that there's going to be capacity issues. But as I said before, every single DHB will have a Māori health team inside of those district health boards, and they will be able to support any of our providers to get out there and either make those associations or, and I don't want to talk on behalf of all iwi because it will be different for everybody. But the suggestion here is getting to know your environment and your kāinga or your area. That's one of the many ways you can do it. Making those linkages will often test whether there is capacity. And of course, depending on the size of your organisation will depend on the kind of opportunities you might be able to raise around creating those linkages. So we're just suggesting a good starting point is the district health boards, and then write it out from there, because they'll probably be able to introduce you, because they usually have iwi Māori councils or iwi partnership groups inside of their district health boards as well, and they'll be able to connect you back to those partnership groups as well.
Kia ora. Wonderful. Question 3. Within the palliative care setting, recruitment of Māori staff is difficult due to the nature of the work. Do you have any suggestions on how an organisation can address this barrier?
Yeah, go for it, Maria.
So what we do here in the Eastern Bay of Plenty is our hospice service, they reach out to providers. They reach out to Māori providers in the Eastern Bay, and so obviously we're one of them. We support them that way by just entering into an MOU with them. And you know, that's the crutch there, is that you don't have to have it within your service. You can start making connections and having relationships with other providers to demonstrate participation and the principles of te tiriti. You know, so you're open to anything there. It's not really a barrier. It's only a barrier because, you know, you don't have that within your organisation. Another organisation's got your back, really. I think we have to start thinking like that, you know, in order to meet these standards and demonstrate that within your policies and your processes, and that will meet that standard that you're referring to there in number 3. Ka pai?
Awesome. Yeah, and palliative care is a tricky one because, for instance, if in Hauraki here, we don't have hospice, you know, hospice facilities past Hamilton really. So the facilities in Hamilton, and people often have to travel there. So I perfectly understand this, that there often are issues around that. But you'll probably find if you have a kaupapa Māori provider in your area that they have an opportunity to be able to partner up. We certainly do the same as Maria. We partner up with people to make sure that people are getting good access. So for instance, here in Hauraki, we often rely on our public health nurses to provide a lot of those services. And so we'll partner up with our public health nurses, particularly if Māori whānau want some support in that area, or they might want kaumātua support, so on and so forth.
Perfect. I'm not sure. It's 12:57. Shall we perhaps make a plan on how we might answer other questions out of session?
I think the idea was that if everybody's put in their questions, we will respond to those. So we'll make sure that we send out responses. And this is our first session, so aroha mai whānau if it was a bit prolonged, or we're just kind of getting used to it. So we appreciate that probably people will have questions, but please don't please keep sending those questions in because we're really happy to respond to them. What we're trying to achieve is to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to test out their thinking. We want to make sure we test out ours, and we completely want to respond to people so that we give people great ideas or opportunities to get around and find more out about it. Yeah, so I think, Jade, you're right. We're probably going to have to call it to an end now. But again, whānau, can I just say thank you so much for participating. I can see the list is really long of providers who have been here. This may not have been the answer to everything, and we as part of your questions, we also want your feedback. So if you think we can do something better, say something better, or just generally you would like different bits of information, happy to have that, because this won't be the first. We're committed to making sure that we keep giving feedback, we keep giving responses, and we are working on an electronic training as well, so that we make it easier for everybody to achieve against the standards. Because it's a virtual world, isn't it, folks? So we'll make sure that we keep working on that piece of work as well. Maria, did you want to add any final comments before we do our karakia whakamatunga? Ka pai. So yeah, again, whānau, thank you very much for your time. We started with karakia, so we're going to finish with karakia. Jade, thank you for doing all the work up. That's awesome and being here today. But mostly to you all, thank you for looking after our people out there. And when I say our people, I mean all of our people from Aotearoa. We're all in this together, whānau. We use a saying, kia whakakotai ai tātou. It means to bring us all together. We're all in this together. We want to provide great services throughout the motu for everybody. That's the only intention here. So if we can help in some way to do that, then that's what we're going to be here. Thank you, Maria. You're awesome today with your examples. And thank you all. All right, let's get to karakia whakamatunga so we can get back to work, shall we? Have you got it on the slide there? It's all right. I'll do our karakia. So this karakia that I'm finishing off with whānau talks about, we started by opening up the avenue to being inclusive, to being together in this conversation, and this karakia really just puts those we call them po, or the things in they're like setting ourselves goals. We've set ourselves some goals. Now we're going to finish this off, capture it off, and keep each other safe. So here goes our karakia whakamatunga. Pauhihiri, paurarama, tia ho i roto marama i roto, tēnā te pau ko te pau ka eke, nā te pau o enei kōrero, ka mā te ariki, ka mā te tauira, kia puta ki te whai ao ki te ao marama, hui te ora, hui te marama, haumi e hui